Good afternoon, everybody. Today's Budget Committee is called to order. Today's date is May 24th, 2021. Ms. Hayes, will you please call roll?
Councilwoman Robinson.
Present.
Councilman Carlisle.
Present.
Councilman Ford. Councilman Jones.
Here.
And Chair Morgan.
Here. As we open today's committee meeting, I want to observe a moment of silence for Officer Scotty Triplett that passed away in the line of duty this weekend. If you all join me now in that moment of silence. Thank you. All right, we have one item on today's agenda, but I'd also like to give an update on what has been a developing situation with the ARP money and federal guidelines and the state comptroller's office, because we've been saying one thing for several weeks about the funding and its ability to do revenue replacement. And now the guidance that we received last week from the federal government and from the state comptroller's office following those federal guidelines is contradicting previous information that we received. So when Councilman Jones was looking at those FY21 revenues and expenditures, and it looked like we were going to have $26 or $27 million in additional FY21. We can no longer say that with certainty. We are not sure that we will be able to use revenue replacement as we had originally thought we would, and that affects the FY21 budget and the FY22 budget. And we can go into more details. Chief Ford is in a meeting right now with the federal government discussing. And I know Chief McGowan and the mayor are in Nashville, and they were meeting with the state comptroller's office to discuss. And so what that potentially does for the FY22 budget is that we would have about an $18 million shortfall as it stands now in terms of revenue replacement that we'd anticipated, which is now not necessarily going to be there. And we also have a $5 million shortfall from the state government, where we'd anticipated that they were going to be granting distressed cities and counties money, and they'd informed us that that amount was going to be $10 million, so that's what we budgeted to. And at the last moment in their session, that money was cut from 10 to 5. So that also, with the $1.3 million from the fire impasse, puts us short about $24.3 million just on those three items. There are several options. We're going to go into more detail about those options tomorrow when we have Chief Ford in discussions for wrap-up. But I wanted council members to be aware that it is a developing situation, and everything I said may change based on the conversations that they've had this afternoon. But just please keep that in mind. If you have any questions, I can answer some of them broadly. But I think we're going to have to get into more detail, and there will potentially be some amendments from the administration coming tomorrow and wrap up in regards to that. Any questions of council members on that before we move on to the City Council grant program?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
How long do we have tomorrow? Do we have allocated?
We start at 2, and I'm not sure there's an end time.
Yeah, I mean,
and then we have Wednesday. Then we have Wednesday for backup as well. I am too, and it looks like there is a chance there will not be a point where we know for beyond a shadow of a doubt that we will be able to use the federal money for revenue replacement. We may have to pass a budget before we know that. And so one of the alternatives we're going to discuss tomorrow is that we would pull from our unrestricted reserve funds, or the rainy day fund, to cover that revenue shortfall. And then throughout the year, we would work with the federal government and the state to see if we couldn't get that guidance changed, because there are going to be a lot of other counties and municipalities across the country that are going to be in this exact same problem. And some of it just arises over the definition of what is general fund revenue, where we had originally done it on a line item basis, but they're speaking more broadly. And so when we had our sewer and our stormwater fees go up, our revenues went up for the city. And that wasn't reflected in our baseline year that was 2019. So revenues went up for the city in some areas, including a referendum tax increase for the sales tax, but we still had shortfalls in other areas because of the pandemic that we couldn't use the increase in sewer revenue to cover for. So it can get complicated, and we've been working on it pretty diligently for the last week. Councilman Jones or Ford, do y'all have a question?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to add up the total again. So you said about 1.2 from the fire impasse.
1.3 from the fire impasse, 5 million from state funding,
Okay.
and 18 million in revenue replacement. That's the FY22 budget.
Okay.
And like I said, the 5 million is definitely gone for the time being because the legislature is out of session. But that 18 million, it's just an unknown. And as it stands now, I don't think we could count that in a revenue column as we have been for the last several weeks and months.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Ford? Okay. All right. Councilman Robinson? Like I said, and just as a heads up, we will be getting more into it tomorrow, but I wanted members to be aware. Okay, let's move on to the one item on our agenda, which is the FY22 City Council Grant Awards. We have a very small print of 2 pages in front of us with a list of allocations from council members totaling $2.6 million. Do I have a motion and a second on this item?
Before you do, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make an amendment as it applies to my allocation.
Okay, can we get it on the floor, then we can amend it without objection?
I'll move it.
Okay, so it's moved. Do I have a second?
Second, Robinson.
Okay, seconded by Councilman Carlisle, moved by Councilman Jones. And if, you'd like to make that motion without objection, Councilman Jones?
Yeah, I'd like to amend my particular allocation. We heard from the Family Safety Center, and we approved it on the grants and agencies, a separate allocation in this budget, but I had allocated $7,500 to them independent of that. And so to prevent any type of double dipping, I'd like to reduce the allocated amount under the column for me by $7,500 to reflect the fact that they received money under a different budget.
At this time, are you ready to reallocate elsewhere?
I am not, so I'll
okay.
put that.
We'll strike that for now. Councilman Carlisle, I see you writing furiously over there. Do you have any amendments? We're already in overtime.
I could submit it in part now, but if you'll allow me, either we can do it today or I can have it ready for a motion tomorrow morning or tomorrow when we sit down for wrap up very, very rapidly. If you'll give me 2 minutes before we.
Okay. Any other council members with adjustments, comments, or questions about this? I see Councilman Ford. Can you speak into the microphone, Councilman Ford, please? Okay.
Sorry about that.
Number 88.
Number 88.
Couture chairs.
Who?
Couture.
Couture chairs. I want to give them 5.
Okay.
There's someone else. Then number, oh Lord, 71. Reach Memphis. Didn't nobody give them anything. I want to give them 5. Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
And then I can. Okay, Orange Mound.
That's 11.
Okay, 15. I'd like to give them 5. Well, no, I'd like to give them. Oh, Lord, what's the difference in that?
Let me see how much they have left.
Y'all forgive me, but my eyes been bothering me and I got on glasses. Still, I just want to make the difference with them.
I think that's gonna be 3,900.
Is it 39?
Wait a minute.
Request, and then they got 1,500.
Let me see. Oh, no, they have all of their.
They have all that? Okay, well, we're not, I'm good right now.
Okay, and Councilman Ford, doing those allocations of 5,000 to Couture Cares and Reach Memphis, that puts you over your allocated amount from 200 to 210,000.
No, I'm at 114.
Is there a bottom line?
I'm at 114.
Oh, no, you're good, you're good.
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
And just make note, I know few of them, and I'm trying to look at them, because I kind of marked them, they did not get any. That's on this sheet. I want to at least give them some.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Chair, I would like to be put in the queue, please. This is Easter Thomas.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at the Excel sheet grant award, and under my column, under additional allocations TBD, it says 8,000, but the last time I checked, it was 14,025. So my question is for whomever can answer, where is the rest of my additional allocation?
That's a good question. I think it looks like it's totaled correctly if I'm just eyeballing it, because there's nowhere that, has like a $25 also. Ms. Hayes?
Yeah, some of the.
Use microphone.
Some of the ones on your list were not included on the May 12th, so they've been included to reflect on this list.
Can you say that again, Ashley?
Yeah, can you please clarify?
Yeah, when you submitted your grant allocations, some of them were not on the list that went out on May 12th. The grant list that went out on May 12th. But you should see all of your allocations on there now.
Okay, but wouldn't that lead to her having more money
It would
to
still be
allocate
my
rather than
same
less money?
Right.
I'll pull your list up and show it to you.
Okay, okay, if, Ms. Hayes and Councilman East Thomas, if y'all could coordinate on that, and we'll get that sorted out. And it sounds like we will have to be making some amendments to this, but to this tomorrow or potentially Wednesday. But if we can, I would like to go ahead and pass what we do have as a slate, and then we can make amendments to it as we go.
Chair.
Councilwoman?
Chair Morgan, I'm in the queue. I was in the queue.
Oh, all right.
This is Councilwoman Logan. I wanted
Councilwoman Logan?
yes, I wanted to make a motion to amend the grant budget for 12,000 for District 1 community improvements.
19,000.
And I wasn't so
Okay.
are you
Yeah.
So for District 1 community improvements, and that's so correct. That doesn't necessarily fall under this nonprofit city council community grant program. And if anything involved in those community improvements would include like a contract for work, that's going to get very tricky with our legal authority to do so with the mayor. So I think it would be much, and if there is something that needs to be done in District 1 in that regards, it's going to be better flowing through your working with the administration to get it done and them finding it within a certain division, whether it be parks or HCD or what have you. And if we can stick the city council community grant program to being not, nonprofits.
right? It is going to go through a nonprofit. The nonprofit just hadn't been settled yet. It's definitely a part of the nonprofit, a part of the grant program that's using nonprofit.
Well, at this time, we will not be able to allocate funding to them if they do not have their nonprofit status.
Oh, no, they definitely have nonprofit. It will be a nonprofit that is already established.
Okay, Council,
I can get with Ashley or whoever I need to get with and bring it back tomorrow.
okay. Did they submit an application before the deadline for the community grant program?
I'm sorry, what did you say, sir?
Councilman, did they submit an application for the community grant program before the deadline or at all?
Well, actually, it's not a particular organization. It's just we're working with an additional group. We're not working with an additional group. We want some community improvements done, and we'll be willing to go through a nonprofit to do it, not going through any contracting like you mentioned before.
Technically, all of these actually end up being contracts at the end of the day. But this is a difference where it's a grant. It's kind of a nonprofit grant contract versus a contract for services. Councilman Logan, this is getting more complicated than this community grant program is intended to be. And if there's there has to be a nonprofit at the end that is receiving funds, and that nonprofit needed to apply through our grant process in order to receive those funds. And it doesn't sound like there is an entity that has been selected to do that.
Not they have been selected to do the specifics, but the nonprofit is that we're using, that we have given grants to. There are nonprofits that do this work that have come before us. It just hadn't been finalized with which one yet, but it will be one that will come before us, that have come before us. It will be one of them.
Well, they need to apply through the city council grant program, not through, some sort of neighborhood grant program that we're going to give funding to then go out and pick the nonprofits. I think that's a process that needs to be heard and vetted and voted on publicly and through the city council. And we had a process that was established by resolution. And I really am going to hold council members and the nonprofits to that process that we voted on already.
I'm not sure if you're if you're understanding what I am asking. So I
Likewise.
need to get with you. Okay. And make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, and then I can, if need be, come back tomorrow. Okay.
I'll try to sum up a little more simply. We are making allocations to established nonprofits that have a 501c3 status, and they, submitted 990s, their budget proposals, and all those things that were required. If they haven't followed, if there's not an entity that has followed a process, that is who we're making the grants to through this process. And if we don't have their information, if they haven't applied, then they're not going to be receiving grant funding this fiscal year.
Okay, I recall earlier that was done. A colleague, that was done, and we've gone through this process. So I didn't know that it couldn't be done, or what you're saying is that it's not something that we have done. But because we did it, that was my thought, that it was available to us. And so I would like to talk to you about that and make sure I'm understanding the process. Okay. And I can come back tomorrow.
And we'll still be making, it sounds like we'll still be making some amendments to this tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And wrap up.
Absolutely.
So let's just discuss between now and then.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Jones.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Logan, I was just trying to get further clarification, because as I'm looking at the report that we have in front of us, I see that you do have $12,000 that hasn't been allocated yet. So were you looking to allocate those $12,000 to an organization that's already on this list, but just happens to be in District 1?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I think we can do that then.
We just need the name of the organization.
Yeah. So was there which one was it?
And I can bring that information in the morning.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that what our process has been. Yeah, what our process has been though. We keep talking. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm listening when you say the process.
Yeah, I was about to say, I would think though that and I think I'm just pointing out Councilman Ford, he did make his at the time that we went through everything last year, but those organizations were still part of the process that we're going through now. So I'm just going to pick the first one on this list, a fresh start to a new beginning. Because we've heard them, we've vetted them, just because, so I have $7,500 left over. Just because I didn't allocate that $7,500 right now, I can allocate them that $7,500 in December, but we've already gone through the process of vetting them. They've turned in the application. So I think that's the distinction that Mr. Ford did, although he did it later on during the year. The organization that he made those grants to, they had already gone through this process of hearing them, interviewing them, and see what the scope of what their services are.
And that's absolutely what I was looking at. And that's the example that I was going to use because I know we had done that with him.
Yeah. I think
I just wasn't familiar with that process and needed to get more information on how to do that based on what you just explained. But that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Because I think that, and this may have been, I can't speak for him, but he may not in agreement. I think that I was under the impression that you wanted to allocate that $12,000 to an organization that's not on this list, that has not been vetted, just out of this, if this is 115 organizations, an organization which would have been 116th organization that did not come before this. Okay.
No, definitely.
Well, no. So based upon
money can be allocated at a later date.
Yeah, you can always allocate that at a later date, tomorrow or any other time, as long as they've come before this body.
Okay, great, and that's what I wanted to do. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
And do we need to continue with the amendment?
If you wanted to now to do it because it's on this list, I would second it.
Okay. Absolutely. I want to make a motion.
But I need to know who I'm seconding.
Oh, okay. So sorry. Okay, well, I'll bring it back tomorrow.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the clarification. Any other council members? Councilman Ford? Oh, we're going to go Councilman Ford, then Councilman Easter Thomas. Councilman Ford?
Thank you. I'm looking through here, the ones that received 0. One is 80.
What's the name?
What is it, Tennessee Shakespeare Company? I want to give them 5. I'm just trying to make sure the ones that did not receive anything. Number 49, Cathedral, what is that, Foundation? Friends? Foundation Incorporated.
I'm looking for
Strive School of Music.
That's going to be 58.
58. 5 for them. These are the ones that did not. I'm looking at zeros to try to help them all. And then 124. What is that? Thistle and B. They didn't receive.
If you could speak up on the name.
Thistle and B.
It's in alphabetical order, the list I have, so it's a lot easier to find it by the name than the number.
Thistle and B.
Okay.
124. 5 for them. They all received 0 monies, so I'd like to give that to them. And I think that's all in there. Everybody else trying to receive something.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Easter Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. And I hate to bring it back up, but I do want just some clarification before we move on this, just because it hasn't been clarified. For my understanding, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, if I had, once again, $14,025 before this process started, and I allocated my $200,000 evenly to the T, I would like to know why I now have $8,000 left in additional allocations to be determined. If anybody can clearly explain that, so I can get an understanding.
Yes, Councilwoman. So if you look on the list that was sent out on May 12th, you allocated $975,000 to Community Legal Center because they were at their full request. However, you originally wanted to allocate them $5,000. So today they were not at their full request. So me and Bryson talked about allocating their $5,000 to them. So that's why you have $8,000 remaining.
It's still not making sense to me. Is there another way you can explain it? I'm sorry, I just don't. It's just not clear.
And I wasn't going through the process, but I think that I had a similar one. So if there was, you could have had another organization where you and I, they may have requested $15,000, but you and I both gave them $10,000. There had been a process. We didn't want any organization to receive an amount greater than what they requested. So that's why it may have been reduced. But now, Ashley I just recall going through that with one of mine early on after I'd submitted anything. And I had, allocated the full $200,000, but then she came back and said, hey, this organization has received their full allocation. Therefore, I had some leftover funds. Right. You following me?
But wouldn't that mean your funds increase, not decrease?
Yes, but I think that there was I think what she's saying here is that there was a reallocation for an organization that you had already funded. So did it take it back up to their previous level? Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's just, and it probably, I'm sure it would be easier if you were looking at it. Let's just say, going back to that example, we have an organization that received that greater amount. You originally requested $10,000 for a separate organization, but they were already above their allocation. And so there was another one that was under their allocation. And I think Ashley said that she and Bryson took it back close to what your original recommendation was.
Right. So for Community Legal Center, you originally allocated $5,000. But at that time, they were already over. So you went back down to $975, which the remaining went in your bank. But today, someone else moved their money, so we put the $5,000 back in your Community Legal Center to make them even.
So I understand that, but what I don't understand is that I have 14 before the allocation.
Right, but what I'm saying is that 14 could have pushed somebody over what they requested. If that full amount of yours would have been. I didn't allocate that 14 though. Yeah, you can allocate it, but I think that how it came back, if you allocated your full 200,000, the reason that you have 14,000 left over is that had it been based upon your original recommendation, somebody, I'll just pick one of the ones that I gave money to, African April. Mm-hmm. They would have gone over their 26,400 that they were requesting.
Right, I understand that, Councilman Jones, but I was alerted that I had that full 14 before this FY22 grant award started, is what I'm saying.
Councilman,
so it wasn't after, it was before.
Okay. I have a suggestion that I think might be easy. If you're at your computer, I don't know if you're calling in or on your computer, but if you can
I'm on my computer.
Okay, so you're looking at the list that we are with all your allocations, and then the additional allocations to be determined at the end is 8,000.
Yeah.
Can you just, between now and wrap up tomorrow, can you just go through that list? And if there's anything you disagree with or you think the amount should change, why don't you, we'll do an amendment to this tomorrow. And so at the end of the day, as long as the 200,000 is allocated to where you want, I think we'll be all good. And so if you can just take a look and see and agree or disagree, and keep in mind that if there is an organization that has already been granted their full amount, we won't be increasing that allocation. Does that work?
Okay, I have another look at it, and if somebody on budget staff can help me further without taking any more time from today, that'll be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other council members?
Yes.
Councilman Ford.
Demand 153. You're trying to change the name to My Zip instead of.
Replace it with my zip.
Yeah.
Well, that's
She applied under my zip too. So we're gonna take the man off.
That's Dr. Mills.
The organization had a name change.
Right.
No, it didn't have a name change. It has two, but she intended for us to go with my zip and not the name. So it's still an application she applied for.
Okay. All right, we'll strike demands and switch it to my zip, as long as my zip turned in a credible application. Okay. Thank you.
Is my zip on this list?
Not on that list, it's on the other list. This is what we got, it's the name that she was using, and when we got out of it, she said, no, it's under my zip.
Well, we didn't get an official application from my zip. She put diamonds. She put diamonds on all of them.
You please check it out, we talked about it, we check.
I will.
Okay.
But, Mr. Chairman, in that sense, though, we would have, if you got two different organizations, it may be the same person, they could have two different purposes.
That's what, right, we wanted to go under illegal dumping.
Well, I was going to say, we're going to make sure my zip turned in an application first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if that paperwork isn't there, and they may have, we've had a couple of people have come forward and said they did one thing, they didn't quite get it done, so we're going to check on that. And if the application's not there, we're going to continue this discussion, and we'll try to see what can be worked out. Anything else from council members? I see that calculator app open down there.
I think I've got all the 20. All right, here we go.
All right.
I will do this in rapid speed, and then we can enter it for the written record. Here we go. All right, I'm gonna go number and then organization. 44 Arrow, 5,000. 60 Ballet Memphis, 5,000. 26 Boys and Girls Club, 5,000. 98 Carpenter Art Garden, 15,000. 40 Circuit Playhouse, 2,000. 136 Collage Dance Collective, 10,000. 42 Family Matters, 10,000. 63 Girls Incorporated, 5,000. 119 Hospitality Hub of Memphis, 20,000. 19 Junior League, 2.5 thousand. 29 Memphis Child Advocacy Center, 10,000. 137 POW, 10,000. 38 Memphis Symphony Orchestra, 10.5 thousand. 69 MIFA, 20,000. 107 My Cup of Tea, 5,000. Number 9 Sweet Cheeks, 10,000. 50 Young Actors Guild, 10,000. 105 Theater Memphis, 5,000. 21 Maritan, 10,000, and I reserve the right to distribute the final 20,000.
Ms. Hayes, were you able to get all that? I lost you about a third of the way through. Okay, we'll do that without objection.
Also triple check my math.
Yes, we will. All right, we'll do that without objection. Anything else from council members on this?
Move the question.
Okay. So we're going to take a vote on this as amended, and there will be other times to amend this as well. And it may be that not all funds are allocated by June 30th when we begin the next fiscal year. So there may be some allocations to come throughout the year from council members that have grant money left over. But again, it's going to be, I believe, the preference, and I would request that council members only allocate to nonprofits that have followed our grant procedures. All right. Any other comments or questions from council members? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to move to a voice vote. All those in favor of the FY22 grant awards as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Opinion chair, the ayes have it. Is there any other business before this committee today?
Yeah, I just real quick, I want to go back and talk about the chair, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I just want to make sure. So tomorrow is budget wrap up. We've got time tomorrow. I guess I'll just say this. I'm still incredibly uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable last week, and now I'm even more uncomfortable this week about where we stand with an operating budget, and we're supposed to be 7 days away from passing one with a significant amount of unknowns. And so I don't know, other than maybe I'm just out here expressing my feelings, but I have serious concerns about passing a budget on time unless a significant amount of information and explaining occurs between now and Tuesday next week.
Well, we were required to pass a budget on time, but the state definition of on time is June 30th. Typically, the way we schedule it is just the first Tuesday of June to give cushion, because there have been in years past where it hasn't been passed on that day and it has to go on to the next meeting. And then maybe there's been an emergency meeting as well. But if that is, it is your prerogative to be concerned and to not feel as if you're ready to vote or pass on a budget, and any council member can make a motion to hold. If there are any concerns that can be allayed between now and June 1st, I think that's always helpful for the body if council members are pursuing whatever information they need outside of these meetings as well. But I will say a lot of our uncertainty, and the uncertainty I'm feeling around this budget, is related to federal funding, and we just may never have guidance in time to pass a budget by June 30th.
Right, and to that, and thank you for pointing out, and yes, I saw Councilwoman Johnson nodding yes. My concern, because unlike to some degree the CARES Act funding, which did have some impact on our operating budget because of personnel reimbursement, so to speak, this is directly tied, and I guess we'll wait for Chief Ford and Chief McGowan to speak tomorrow, but I hope that tomorrow is a very helpful, robust discussion. $18 million out of our unreserved fund balance to front is a significant amount of cash, and there are other ways to bridge the gap that may not be out of our fund balance, and that may be, and I'll just say it for, again, the tens of people, but it may be furloughs. It may be other things that fall within the guidance of ARPA that we know today that aren't revenue replacements. And so, again, my hope is I don't want to drag people down here unnecessarily and waste time, but, a lot of information has to be, I feel like I'm paddling without a rudder here. I mean, it seems like we're being asked to pass a budget here in the next 7 days with a significant amount of unknowns.
Yeah.
So,
and
I'll just leave it at that.
And if you remember, for context, last year we passed a budget pulling $39 million from our unrestricted reserve fund, and we were fortunate that the revenues came in greater than anticipated. That it did while the COVID impact had a huge social impact and fiscal impact for a lot of people, it didn't change the revenues of the city all that much across the very bottom line. And so we're still, I think, rallying from COVID, and there's just going to be some unknown in every budget as you're trying to project the needs of the city for the next year. But we're going to try to do it with the best guidance possible. And again, this is a busy time, and it takes a lot more hours than a typical issue or ordinance that we might vote on. So anything that council members need to request from the administration in terms of information, you can certainly do it on your own, or if you think it's something that would benefit the entire body, please make the request to me, and we'll make sure to get them in here for a presentation.
I have one request then to that note.
Okay.
Has the Memphis city government extinguished all CARES Act funding? And if so, can they account for it?
Okay, we'll have Chief Ford answer that to the best of our ability tomorrow. Any other comments or questions from council members, business for this committee? I see Councilman Smiley move the mic away. All right, seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.